Thank you, Chairman Thune. And since this committee held a hearing to protect consumer data 2 weeks ago, consumers have already been subjected to 2 extraordinary data breaches. And I believe Chairman Thune mentioned one of them, the Facebook. Hackers accessed 50 million Facebook users, although Facebook still does not know who the hackers are and which accounts were hacked. And Google just disclosed this week a security flaw that it discovered in March that affected hundreds of thousands of people using its Google Plus social network. It seems like hardly a week goes by that there aren't new examples of how tech companies are just not doing enough to protect consumer privacy. In our last hearing, I raised the issue of this in terms of children. Parents often trust these platforms with their children's information. As part of this privacy discussion, we must prioritize protecting children in this increasingly online world. And this question is to Ms. Moy and Ms. O'Connor. The nature of the internet has evolved from a keyboard to mobile devices that fit in our pocket to the current day iteration of voice interface. Is COPPA an example of the regulation that has adapted with the rapid evolution of technology, and how has this law succeeded in keeping up with these changes, and how has it failed?
Thank you. So the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, I do think that one thing that's really great about that act is that it gave rulemaking authority to the Federal Trade Commission. The Federal Trade Commission did expand the definition of personal information in its implementing rule in 2012 in an attempt to keep up with rapidly advancing technology. I agree that additional protections may be needed for children in the modern era. That said, I do think that COPPA has proven itself to be a pretty flexible law.
Yeah. Ms. O'Connor.
Thank you, Senator. You know, as a mother and a soon-to-be stepmother of 6 children, ranging from 9 to 19, I feel strongly about the step-up nature of the use of the internet from the youngest to the oldest, teenager, and so on. COPPA certainly has its strengths, and it's been effective in its enforcement by the Federal Trade Commission, but as you know, it stops at 13, and there's a big gap between the young teen and the adult, and we need to explore what that world looks like for those in transition from teenage to adulthood. We also, as you correctly point out, are moving from a world where the internet was something you sat down to do at your computer, to carry around to your phone, to embedded in the walls of your house and your school and your car, and we are particularly concerned at the Center for Democracy and Technology about the use and collection of data in schools by for-profit companies and by other entities, and what that kind of data determinism looks like as kids apply to college and beyond.
Thank you very much. This question's to the entire panel. A recent New York Times analysis found that both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store have apps in their respective children's or family sections that potentially violate COPPA. What specific roles should platform owners play to ensure compliance on their platforms?
Senator, in the hearing 2 weeks ago, the representative from Google said that they relied on the app developers to tell them whether or not it was a child-directed app, and they relied on the app developers to self-certify. And this is, I think, where a good example of the fact you need really robust enforcement. I mean, you know, it's like waiting for the cops, you know, to call the cops and tell them you've been speeding. I mean, it's just, it doesn't work, sir.
What would you do in Europe with this kind of situation?
In Europe, with this kind of situation, it depends. The controller can't rely on the app developer, because the controller is responsible for what he's doing and for what he's providing. And if there are problems regarding children, there are complaints, or also if there are no complaints, because we can have investigations ex officio, we're going to investigate those cases.
I do think that, so there are a couple things that have proven problematic. So one is that there are incentives set up essentially for those that have app stores to essentially just have no knowledge of whether or not apps on their platform are directed to children. That is a gap that should be fixed. And I've lost my second point.
Well, we certainly think that the immediate company, the app developer or owner, is the ultimate responsibility. We certainly would look at what kind of compliance mechanisms exist for the larger platforms to take action against those companies that they become aware of that are not complying.
Thank you, and my time's expired. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for really focusing in on this and having a number of hearings.